Good evening. I call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council in Lakewood, Colorado, July 24th, 2017 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul.
Here.
Coop.
Here.
Wickman. Gutwein.
Here.
Franks.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Royball.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Abel.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Shakti.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Well, thank you. And I would also like to welcome our clerk back to chambers. She's been gone for a little bit. Welcome back. It's nice to see you. And Michelle did a wonderful job filling in as well, and I think she enjoyed hanging out with us, maybe not. All right, thank you all for coming out, taking part in your local government. We always welcome you here, especially on Monday nights. And if you do have a cell phone, ask that you please put it on silent and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, and please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer. Thanks. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Will the clerk please read item 4 into the record?
Item 4, presentation, the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Community, Dog Parks, Dog Waste, and Leash Law Proposal.
All right. It looks like it's Ms. Novak and Ms. Girk who are going to come on up and educate us a little bit. This is a fun night. We have a few presentations. And keep in mind, we'll gladly welcome public comment at the regular public comment portion, which will be after the presentations, and you'll be able to have that opportunity to comment on anything that you just heard. Do you want to mention something about this process, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, I'm thrilled that we've made a little bit of changes to our process. When I served on ACIC, we as committee chairs only got to make our presentation to the council officers, and I always wanted to make the presentation to the council and actually be able to look at people's eyes and get the feeling. So I'm thrilled that we've changed that process a little and we can acknowledge all your hard work. So thank you for all that you do.
Great.
Come on down, my knees are shaking.
Well, welcome.
Thank you so much. So we're very excited to be here tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And we would like to share with you what we've found on the dog issues proposals. And it is in 3 parts. There's leash and waste areas, and then also Lynn will present on the dog parks. So for the leash and waste research, our assignment was to research and recommend solutions for strengthening enforcement of leash laws and also disposal of dog waste. What we found on the leash area is that a majority of the calls that come out to the Lakewood Animal Control are mostly unattended animals that are running loose. What we found regarding the waste is that it's either people, owners have chosen not to pick it up or doing half the job of just picking it up and leaving it. Also in our research, we compared other cities to find out what their rules are for dog leashes and also picking up waste, and we found that they're pretty much consistent. We'd also like to share with you some of the current dog waste campaigns that we've found, mostly in Colorado, but then also we've got one from Northeast Ohio, which is the pickup poop. Okay. Some of our key findings that we have found are the lack of compliance with the leash law, and in not complying with the leash law, there's a danger to people and other dogs as well. We've found that combining efforts using education, signage, bag availability, and enforcement to clean up dog waste is very helpful. We've also determined we'd also like to determine the success of Jeffco's Let's Do It campaign. I'm not sure if they're tracking results or how they're tracking results, to what criteria they're using to determine the success of that. We also found that additional trash can availability would be helpful. And of course, if we have additional signage, which would be also recommended, there is an associated cost with increasing signage. Our recommendations are to increase the enforcement of the leash law, to increase the number of trash cans along the concrete pathways. We understand that increasing trash cans along single-track dirt trails is not possible just because of vehicle access for collecting the waste from those trash cans. We can operate a test period of increased enforcement and offer penalty options such as financial penalties or even a cleanup penalty where folks could choose to pick up dog waste at dog parks. We also recommend adding the animal control enforcement phone number to those signs that are located in the city of Lakewood. And increase the outreach with schools and other organizations. Additional recommendations are to, it'd be nice to require, however, it would be strongly recommended for developers to provide an on-site pet relief area with multifamily developments for both new and existing developments. And also to continue current educational campaigns and focus on the benefits of having your dogs on leash and the benefits and health implications of leaving dog waste. I'd like to thank my fellow committee members for their hard work and research time.
Raise your hand.
They're
Who's
here tonight.
All right.
So if we could.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I broke the rules, so now the rest of the night we're going to be doing this.
Thanks for the jazz hands. But I'd like to go ahead and have Lynn share the dog park findings with you.
Before questions, if that's okay.
Great. Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. And I don't know if I get the more fun one over poop and leash, but I probably get the more expensive assignment. But anyway, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present. I am Lynn Novak. I am the chair of the Neighborhoods Committee. So with our, oh, I should pause on that so you guys could see my lovely graphic there, right? And of course, they're well behaved, so that's what we strive for, right? All right, so our request from the City Council was simply, should the city provide for other dog parks? And if so, recommend locations. At first with this assignment, it was really easy to go down a few rabbit holes, and we of course did, trying to solve the problems at dog parks, you know, unfortunately, problems that arise from the dog parks. There are many opinions about this topic as well. But we finally just had to reel ourselves in and say, what was the assignment? It was simply the question, should we allow for more dog parks, and where, if we decide to say yes? The summary of our research, I'll review a few points. Of course, the rest is in the packet. But we looked at several dog parks in the metro area, mostly focusing on the number of dog parks in comparison to the population. Probably not surprising, there are a number of communities that have more dog parks than the population that the city of Lakewood has. We started out initially with the goal of identifying 2 potential dog parks per ward. We ended up identifying 12 potential dog parks that I'll review here in a minute. We kept our selection criteria very simple. Our focus was on 3 specific points. How accessible is the location? What does the parking situation look like, either existing or the ability to expand? And finally, what is the proximity to the neighborhoods? Yes, you want a location close, but not too close. In talking with several residents, we have found out people want dog parks, just not next to their house.
Whoa.
Is that shocking? No, that's not shocking. So I will take it one ward at a time and review our 12 options that we considered. Ward 1, we looked at and are proposing 2 potential locations, Graham Park and Union Ridge Park. In Ward 2, we also identified 2 potential locations, Aviation Park and Washington Heights Park. In Ward 3, we identified the most locations, Addenbrook Park, Belmar Park, Bonfils-Stanton Park, and the South Sheridan Fields. Ward 4, we identified 2 locations, Lower Ravine Park and Sutherland Shire Park. And finally, in Ward 5, also 2 locations, Cottonwood Park and Kendrick Lake Park. So so that's our research, or at least the summary of our research that I'm going to review. So our recommendations. First, our committee unanimously recommends that the city of Lakewood pursue the addition of at least 1 dog park. I will say our committee is made up of a mixed bag of folks. We even have a few that could care less whether we had another dog park or not, but they recognized the need. We also talked to several neighbors and residents, and overwhelmingly the consensus was there was a need for another dog park in the city of Lakewood. Next, we are not recommending a location in Ward 4, primarily because of the existence of Forsberg Iron Dog Park. However, we did not want to skip the exercise of identifying at least potential locations, so as I reviewed a couple minutes ago, we did identify 2 locations. So let me review the 4 recommended locations that our committee came up with, and also, as a reminder, we have several pictures in your packet. So first up, Addenbrook Park in Ward 3. We have the location here as, I know that's a little hard to see maybe in the back, but we have the location here at Garrison and Virginia. And all honesty, this is a huge park. You could probably pick any intersection there, as you can see how big it is. It's well over 100 acres. Next, we recommend Bonfils-Stanton Park as an option, and that is also in Ward 3. That's located near Pierce in Kentucky, and it has over 12 acres in total area. Third, in Ward 5, we recommend Kendrick Lake Park. It's near Garrison and Jewell, and it's a very large area of 57 acres. And finally, we recommend in Ward 1, the beautiful Union Ridge Park, located near Zhang and 6th, and it has over 21 acres of area. So this map provides a nice overview, a nice visual of where the 4 recommended locations are in comparison to Forsberg Iron. Again, I know this is probably an eye chart, but the lower left-hand corner in the blue font, you'll see Forsberg Iron Dog Park right there, and the 4 recommended locations to the east and north of there. Finally, during our extensive research, we came across a number of things that we felt could assist the city staff as they took on this endeavor. I want to discuss just a few of them. The whole list is in your packet. First, develop 2 separate areas, one for large dogs and the other for small, timid, or even handicapped dogs. I personally visited numerous dog parks in addition to dog parks outside of the state that had this feature, and it worked very well. Next, provide both drinking fountains and shade for humans and dogs. This was one topic as it relates to Forsberg Iron that we heard frequently, and unfortunately, it's the lack of these 2 items in that park. Next, seek input as well as volunteers from neighborhoods who are willing to adopt the park. This could increase buy-in and, more importantly, keep the park clean. Clean of what, you ask? And finally, something that the city of Arvada has done, solicit contributions from businesses that will help defray the cost. This could be anything from fencing material or even ground cover. So before Cindy and I welcome questions, I also want to recognize the individuals that participated, and we've got a few here. Woo-hoo. Raise your hand. Hey. Mila Mary.
Nice job. We'll do.
And I apologize, but I had to include my dog Finn. She helped me research the dogs, and she was very instrumental in the research. So we will welcome questions.
And I think there will be some. Fantastic job. Always great to see you and hear you know, these two especially are kind of challenging. So I appreciate the work that went into this. And it looks like Counselor Franks is going to lead us off with questions.
Well, I appreciate that last slide that answered many of the questions about how we're going to mitigate some of the problems, separating dogs maybe a little bit more aggressive in the different sizes, but really wanted to back up to the leash and to the waste management. And when we talked about increased enforcement, did you guys dig a little bit deeper on that? Because the issue really is that much of that is transient behavior. You know, somebody's walking their dog off leash and from a reporting standpoint, they're continuing to move. So, you know, what does that enforcement look like? I mean, you certainly have the, you know, can people report through a photograph? Again, you're starting to look at where people are having to turn in a neighbor. And so it's like if the behavior is there and people are offended by it, but maybe don't have avenues. So did you explore kind of that transient nature and what enforcement looks like? And then how would people be able to effectively report it without breaking relationships inside their own community?
We did actually speak with Michael Brogan, the supervisor for animal control, and he indicated that most of the calls are from unattended dogs running loose. And so that's more, I guess, does kind of address some of the transient, as well as some dogs breaking out of backyards and just breaking away or just intentionally being let loose. As far as the enforcement, I think that our recommendation of adding the phone number, the enforcement phone number to the City of Lakewood signs for the leash law ordinance would be helpful. That people could just call and not have to identify who they are, but they could identify where they are, and a more instant communication and of the instance of a dog running loose.
Okay. And I'm thinking about, like, we've got folks in my neighborhood who I don't know where they live. They continually walk their dogs, and the dog is 3 to 5 paces in front of them off leash, and they're carrying the leash. And it's kind of like where you don't know where they live. What is your mechanism? And I think most folks are of the belief that because they're transient, the time you would call that in, they'd be long gone. You're not going to stalk them. I mean, we're not getting to that point, but I'm just trying to say that I think some of these are a little bit more challenging, and I would like to see some maybe down the line, if we could kind of dig deeper on this to find, well, what are those mechanisms? How do we educate? And then how do we enforce? Because you see repeat behavior for which there is never any solution. It's just simply that the neighborhood starts to tolerate it. They get to know the dog well enough to see that he's not aggressive to other humans, but then maybe 6 weeks later, we find he's aggressive to another dog. So again, I'm just trying to get in front of, when we just say increased enforcement, it's important for me to know what that looks like a little bit more tangibly. So, but I appreciate that maybe you didn't get a chance to dig that deep into this discussion.
So we'll continue with questions. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you. These were excellent presentations, and I know it wasn't exactly fun to study poop, so sorry about that. However, it is a fact of our life, I'm afraid. You know, I live right next to Kendrick Lake Park, and there are lots and lots and lots of people with dogs. I have taken to thanking the people that I watch as they go by and clean up after their dog. And I've also stuffed my pockets full of those free plastic bags. And when someone walks away from it, I hand them a plastic bag and say, thank you so much for, picking up after your dog. I think maybe a little assertion of expectations of the other people that are walking around. It's one thing about not wanting to stir up problems, but the reality is we all own these parks, and we all need to have the same sort of responsibility. And if we don't ask our neighbors to be accountable, no one will clean up the parks. So now I'll get off my soapbox for just a minute and say what a wonderful job both of you did. The other thing that I really enjoyed in the packet that you did was Boulder's presentation about off-leash, what was the name of that program?
Voice control?
Yeah, that was a phenomenal process. And I felt like, that would be when we implement our next dog park, that would be probably a really good program to put in place for people to know what to do. I thought that was a phenomenal idea. So thank you.
Counselor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you for your nice presentation. As I was reading through the materials, some of the nice amenities that you mentioned, you know, nice surf, ground, benches, water faucets, that kind of thing. As you mentioned, that all costs money. Is there any consideration to have some type of licensing fee for animals that would include to help offset the cost for this? Because basically all taxpayers will be paying for this whether you have dogs or not. And I just think that might be something to at least throw into the mix.
Yeah, actually, I'm assuming you're talking about dog parks, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we looked at, and we did a survey in one of the appendices, I think it was Appendix A, has some of the results, and we actually had responses from a few of the people that filled them out that said they would not mind a fee. Right. And there are dog parks in the area, in Metro Denver area, that do charge a fee that will offset some of that. So that is certainly something to explore. We did not consider that as an option because we did not want to touch fiscal, but I think city staff would and should dive into that. And I do actually have additional information on that I can include in the research folder for the city staff.
Thank you. I'd like to see that.
How about the
Also-
fines from the off-leash penalties to help offset
Right, it would
that?
help offset the enforcement. Also, when you mentioned keeping the parks clean, you were talking about volunteers. I think that's going to get a little tricky. I live close to Holbrook Park, and Charlie and I spent one morning over there doing our city work and cleaning up dog do. But we felt like it was something that was important to the lady that was sponsoring it. And to have ongoing volunteerism to keep these clean rather than having the city maintenance. I guess that's what you're trying to say, is that there would not be...
It was in addition to, because there are a lot, what you will find, especially when we talked with citizens, neighbors, a lot of people want dog parks in their neighborhood. As I mentioned, jokingly, of course, you don't want them right next door to you, but if you walk a few blocks, I think you will find some neighbors would adopt a dog park because that's how passionate folks are. Okay. You know, and the other thing, if you've spent any time in dog parks, I spent a lot of time in dog parks because I've got a 3-year-old border collie who really likes to run. It's really self-policing. Unfortunately, unless you're going to put somebody on. And people aren't shy. There are a few people that are shy, but people are not shy. So you would hope that helps too.
Okay, and my last comment is Jefferson County commissioners were dealing with this, and it got to be a very thorny issue for them, in particular because of groundwater issues when the dew is not picked up, which we would try to avoid. I'm wondering, in the consideration of the particular parks that you were looking at, was groundwater one of the issues that you also looked at?
We looked at the issue of it, but not exploring where the groundwater was in the parks that we looked at, just mainly because of information that we did not have access to.
Because I'm thinking of Councilor Harrison's Kendrick Park. It has a beautiful lake in it, and I don't know what the groundwater is like that and how far away it would be, but I think that needs to be part of what we're looking at as well. I don't want to ruin what we've already got.
Councillor Shakti and then Roy Ball.
Thank you. I've been hearing and thinking about dog parks for many years. Ward 3 there are a number of people in Ward 3 excited by the idea. I like the 2 parks that you talk about in Ward 3, and that made it in the final 4. I think makes sense. Bonfils Stanton, as you mentioned, maybe closer to more people. There might be other considerations, but I think that proximity would have to do with use some. And I assume the map you showed doesn't go all the way to Pierce, but I assume that you're talking about the area that does go all the way to Pierce, right?
Yeah.
Although there is a waterway there, so to Councillor Johnson's point. And I also think that in my sense of things, just like you said, I think there are plenty of people who would be willing to pay some kind of fee to use a dog park since there is an ongoing cost. So thank you.
Council President Roybal.
Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation. It's fantastic. Again, I've heard the same, that there is a need for a dog park. The recommendation that you brought for Ward 3 was Addenbrook Park and Bonfie-Stanton Park. Bonfie-Stanton Park was purchased many years ago and was undeveloped. They just bought it for a piece of land, and then they were eventually going to develop it as a park. And at this present time, there's just a small piece that's being developed. The other piece is just open fields. Now, when you talked about getting a park developed, and you talked about different areas and portions where it needed water, shade, and different areas for handicap dogs or shy dogs in the area, I think that's a great idea. You also brought up a few other things that I wanted to kind of talk through and clarify. When you talked about people that are enthusiastic about their animals, like I have 2 dogs, so my dogs eat before I do. That being said, the dog lovers, they'll tell you straight out up front that their dogs they're going to eat before they do. So that being said, my thought is that there's a lot of businesses that are out there that want to participate if you were to ask them, volunteering. And businesses, lumber companies or hardware stores or other companies that would provide the material, but you also have a lot of service clubs that would like to volunteer. You have the Scouts, the boys and the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, but you also have other entities along the area, which are the churches and the service clubs that are in there. And if we would give them an opportunity to come out and say, would you like to participate? This is what we have. If we can get the city to help us develop a plan, put it in there, and get the service folks to come out along with the businesses, it shouldn't cost the city much of anything other than the water and the main structure. And as far as servicing, you brought up a great point, is that we should do an adopt a dog, a dog run there, or a dog park, and have a service industry come in every week or every during the summer months, maybe twice a week, during the winter months once a week, to come in and kind of look over what's going on and kind of have like a committee to come together. So I don't think it would probably cost the people to come in anything, and that would be great, and then ask them if they'd like to volunteer and if they'd like to donate to the cause. I think that would be great, especially in Ward 3, and I think that would really help. So you did bring out a lot of good points, and I'd like to see if we can kind of, flush those out a little bit, if that is a possibility. And, keep me in mind when you start breaking ground, because I'd like to participate. That's all I got.
Councilor Vincent.
Just real quick, and I don't know if this is more of a question for staff perhaps, but I think we have lots of fields, we have lots of stuff that's not parks. And there have been issues now because they've been trying to monitor these places for for the dog waste. And people are pushing back saying, we don't have to clean up anything unless it's in a park. And I don't know if we can expand that maybe to say that it is an issue. You're supposed to clean up after your dog no matter where, not just if it's in a park. I was a little flabbergasted. But I wonder if maybe we can expand that a little bit?
It does, in the Lakewood ordinance, it does state. Appendix A?
Yeah, I know in the ordinances it does. I guess what I'm trying to say is the campaign, the let's do campaign or don't do whatever, it's just in parks. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is now people are under the impression, they don't read the ordinance, but they're reading the signs and they're thinking the only time they can run their dog anywhere and it can do whatever, but the only time they have to clean it up is when it's in a park. So,
Do you mean like an official park? And because I'm thinking
seriously, yeah.
concrete pathways that have undeveloped land on both sides, and there is like the City of Lakewood ordinance sign right there. So it does identify, pick up your dog waste, and then.
Okay, I just didn't know if we could maybe take some of the focus off just parks and make it more of a generic. It was just a suggestion. Because people are thinking, I don't know why, but they just have to do it if it's in a park. So, thanks.
Councillor Gutwein.
Thank you. Just awesome work on this. I think that I'm really excited to read about the dog park because I did hear a lot about that when I was knocking doors, and it's exciting to think about Lakewood getting another dog park. And I think you did a great job raising a lot of the same questions that I had and a lot of the community will have about the dog park. And I think it was also in the Imagine Lakewood survey as well. So it'll be interesting. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I think that choosing the location will be a major challenge, like you highlighted, for a number of different reasons. And but I love all of the things that you thought about, like having the small dogs separate from the large dogs. And also, I have 2 dogs, and I pick up our dog poop. It's gross. But could everyone just pick up after their dogs? And we also have our kids now have that for their chore. So make your kids do it. It teaches them the value of the dollar. Great job. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
One last item I failed is that there was one incident here in Ward 1, a very, very high density, nice apartment build out. And they allow dogs, and I totally think that's awesome. I agree with that. But the folks were taking their dogs to the local park and were not cleaning up after them. That we as a council maybe need to consider language, frankly, that if you have high density that allows dogs, that you also provide your own dog run on that premise rather than in the adjacent parks. And the interesting thing was they were actually doing DNA tests on the poo to find out who the dog belonged to. We've come a long way.
All right, with that said, thank you again very much. And I think twofold, what I would recommend, and if council agrees, is that we send this to staff and tie it also into the Imagine Lakewood, into the community survey, because we're going to have a lot of information from that as well, especially pertaining to dog parks, to combine that and then see what any sort of recommendations come out of that from staff as far as ideas where parks and an extensive community outreach process, because this will be quite challenging in some neighborhoods, potentially, maybe not, but we shall see. Is that amenable to council?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much.
In addition, Cindy and I actually met with city staff before that survey came out, and they heard both of our proposals. So I think they got a lot of our feedback for that survey, so it was good.
Nicely done. Next time, bring your dog, because it's part of the group here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Clerk, please read item 5.
Item 5, presentation Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Community Liquor Distance Requirement Proposal.
All right. And Kernan Maletsky, come on down. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome.
Thank you.
There.
Rock and roll.
All right.
All right. Mayor Paul, City Council, thanks for having us tonight on ACIC presentation evening at the City Council meeting here. We're here to talk about the 500-foot liquor distance requirement proposal, which I'll be presenting on behalf of the Civic Awareness Committee. So, you have asked us to look into whether Colorado's statewide restriction on liquor licenses is right for the city of Lakewood. And what we found is that this is an immensely complicated issue. There are a lot of things that go into it, a lot of people on both sides, a lot of really compelling arguments, and even just the basic facts of this issue are really complex. There are 13 different types of liquor licenses offered by the city of Lakewood, and there are 5 different types of schools. So in the midst of all that complexity, over a year of research, what we're really hoping to do is kind of offer a frame for the discussion, narrow down some of the key issues, some of the things we heard again and again, and hopefully that's what you'll hear in the next 5 minutes or so here. So some background. The state of Colorado has a law restricting liquor licenses within 500 feet of schools. However, any city or municipality may remove or change any part of that restriction as it chooses. And just for some context here, there are 11 states in the country that have such a restriction. So, the first thing we did was look at some of our neighbors. What have they done? And the most common thing we found is the change that has been most common is to remove hotel and restaurant licenses from the requirement. And as you can see here, all 6 of the large neighboring cities of Lakewood have done that at some point in the last 30 years. Worth noting here that some of these cities have made additional changes to the restriction, removed additional license types, or changed the distance requirement. We can go into that if you like. It's also in the packets you have. Just because something is right for other cities, though, of course, does not mean it's right for Lakewood. So we did talk to some people in the community, did some additional research, and we kind of encountered 4 main possible effects that changing this restriction might have, and we'd like to go through each of the 4 of those really briefly here. The first one was whether, if we change the restriction, will students have more access to alcohol? This is kind of a hard thing to think about, but one way to approach this might be to look at liquor violation rates. The vast majority of these are for serving minors. In fact, in the last 5 years in Lakewood, 86% have been for serving minors. So these are kind of tough statistics. They vary from year to year. It's a small sample size. However, we thought it might be useful to compare the rate of violations from cities that have removed the restriction for hotel and restaurant licenses to those that have not, and see whether there was a broad correlation between those cities and the rate of liquor license violations. What we found was that there was not, in fact, a correlation. You can see here there were 2 cities in 2016 that had not removed the restriction for hotel and restaurant licenses. Those were Lakewood, of course, and Aurora, which made the change in December of 2016. And as you can see here, kind of all over the place, there's nothing to suggest that cities that have removed the restriction have seen a dramatic increase in the rate of liquor license violations. The other concern was a little bit more subjective, and it was what we heard from principals, some citizens. If we remove parts of this restriction, will we damage the social atmosphere around schools? And what we found in talking to these people was that there was some concern about that, but that the concern was less serious for hotel and restaurant licenses. There's a lot of reason for that. One thing might be that there are other things that you might do at a hotel, a place with a hotel and restaurant license, besides consume alcohol. So that's something to consider as the debate progresses here. As for the positive developments, so the most obvious one is economic development. There are establishments within 500 feet of schools currently that might apply for a hotel or restaurant license, and maybe that would cause an increase in revenue overall, and potentially therefore an increase in sales tax revenue for the city. What you're looking at here on the screen is Michi, which is right next door to a Montessori school in Stapleton in Denver. It's one of 4 establishments that opened in the city of Denver with a hotel or restaurant liquor license within 6 months of them making that rule change in 2012. Now, the city applied special scrutiny to those licenses in that time because they wanted to see what negative impacts there might be. And in that time, there were no liquor license violations at any of those 4 establishments, and no reports of increased crime or disturbances in the area. So that's one anecdotal suggestion that we might experience something positive like that in Lakewood. The other one was a little less obvious maybe, and that's residential development. What do we mean by that? So in Denver, counterintuitively maybe, two of the biggest pushers for this change to allow hotel and restaurant licenses within 500 feet of schools were community groups in Stapleton, but also in downtown Denver, who saw the growth of their communities, which were very dense, mixed-use types of communities, as being impeded by this restriction. And we have some places in Lakewood that might fall into that same category where it would be hard for families to grow in place in a dense, mixed-use place because of the desire, achieving the desired mix of amenities could be impeded by this restriction as it currently stands. So that's another opportunity to consider. That brings us to our recommendations. The first one, of course, comes from a lot of the research we did here, and it's that we suggest that the city exempt hotel and restaurant licenses from the rule. That's something that's been tested in a lot of our neighboring cities. It's also something that we heard some support for from citizens, principals, so there's some evidence that that might work out here. The other thing we want to do, though, is recognize that there are some risks here, for sure. And so one way to maybe mitigate some of those risks would be to apply additional scrutiny to those establishments seeking a hotel or restaurant license. There are some precedents around the metro area. For example, in Littleton, the leadership of the school is invited to give comment on each liquor license that's within 500 feet of its establishment, so that it can offer any objections it might have and prolong the debate a little, make sure there's nothing unintended happening. There are other ones around town. And then, so yeah, and again, that just offers a safeguard maybe against some unintended consequences, because it is hard to predict what might happen here. And then finally, as we said at the outset, this is a very complicated issue. There's a lot of things that could happen, a lot that's really hard to prove with some of the research that's out there, something that maybe you just kind of need to keep observing as things go on. So in addition to, of course, city staff conducting additional research, we suggest that if any changes are made, that the city monitor those changes very carefully to see if we're experiencing any of those positive or negative consequences, and whether there may be additional discussions here. There are, as I said, 13 types of licenses, and maybe we want to explore the possibility of removing the restriction for some of those other licenses down the road. So we could explore that as it comes. That's about all I have. I want to thank the rest of the members of the Civic Awareness Committee, and with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Very nice. Well done. Well done. And great information. And just so folks know how we got here from a neighborhood restaurant that many people frequent. But the idea was, or not the idea, but the problem was, how do we just change one? And so we asked you to dig into it and come back and say, you know, you really need to look at the whole license and all the ramifications, not just the one instance. So that's where we're at, and I think it's a great presentation, and I personally would like to see it move on to staff to bring to council for a public hearing down the road. So, Councilor Coop.
Thank you for the presentation. I thought one thing in your report which totally caught me by surprise, when one neighborhood organization backed this plan to remove the foot limit. It wasn't here in Lakewood, it was in another jurisdiction, was so it wouldn't limit schools coming in. Totally caught me by surprise, because how could a school come in if there was somebody that served liquor within 500 feet? I thought that was very, very interesting. So thank you for mentioning that. I have a question as far as timing. What is the quickest way, if the council decides to go forward with accepting the recommendations, what's the quickest time frame that we could get this to council for a vote?
Ms. Watson?
Thank you. It's a change in the ordinance, so it would need to go through first and second reading. And in advance of that, we would just need time for staff to prepare the language.
Okay. And let me just say, I'll just say that if council decides to go forward with this, I would like to see it move through as quickly as possible.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
I appreciate that thought, although there is in recommendation 3, the Civic Awareness Committee suggests that a lot more research and additional collection of citizen comment be incorporated in this process. I appreciate the work that's already been put into this, and I think that we certainly should heed that caution that we look at it very, very closely. When I was too young to buy alcoholic beverages, we got around it by going to liquor stores late at night when no one was really looking. And I think that there's very little chance, or there's much less chance, that kids are going to go to a restaurant and pay the higher price and be there for their parents' friends might walk in and catch them with a beer. So I don't think the abuse of that is going to be a huge problem, but I do think we should look very closely when we go to change these kind of regulations. So I would argue maybe less against taste and more for caution, but I'm certainly willing to let it go to staff and pick it up from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wickman.
I would like to second Councilor Coop's comments about let's fast track this. In the example of Las Fuentes, they've been hanging for a year and a half now, and there's just no need for this. We can see that there's not a problem, and to keep them hanging is just wrong. I do have a question, though. We talk about violations. How many of these violations are coming from restaurants versus package stores?
Great question. So, I mean, there's the overall rate of liquor violations is a little bit lower at restaurants and hotels than overall across the 13 types of licenses. I could look through here and get you the exact number. Were you looking for just a general comparison, or?
I'm assuming it's night and day, but
it's not necessarily night and day. There are certainly again, the sample sizes are so small and inconsistent. There are way more hotel and restaurant licenses than any other single type of license. So there are a lot, like I think 27 or something in 2016 at hotels and restaurants, over 130 something licenses. But yeah, it's not the highest rate of violation. But as I was saying, violation rates can be a little tricky. They're not always enforced in quite the same way, just because of the nature of how those things are done. So I would caution about reading too much into the violation statistics for this particular thing.
Okay. Councilor Gutwein.
Awesome job. Awesome presentation. I actually had the same question about whether or not it was higher in the restaurants or higher in the liquor stores, and your answer is sufficient to just know that what you just said is great. And I also really like that you looked at the angle of, okay, let's consider doing this. We're one of the only cities that haven't done this yet, but let's apply the higher level of scrutiny. I think that's appropriate when we're dealing with potential access to liquor for kids. And then I also think it is really good to look at these liquor licenses and continue to update them. I know one question I had is I'm learning a lot about how our liquor stores and the licensing also impacts youth access to tobacco. And so that's something that hopefully we'll look at later on. It's also an ACIC. I don't know if you're working on that one as well. So I think it's good to look at these and see, some are going to increase access to youth and some really won't. So we don't need to have across the board regulation. I am more than happy to support passing this forward to staff and give it a close look with our community. So thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you, and excellent presentation, and I loved in the packet you had lots and lots and lots of good numbers, which really helped me. I don't drink alcohol. However, I believe that this probably is appropriate to move forth to staff. I want to add one extra little thing to look at. If we could, especially the ones that are close to the schools, have a temporary or a trial period where the extra scrutiny, to where if there's any kind of problems, we can put a kibosh to it fairly quickly. And I would like to see that maybe a year or maybe even 2 years, whatever city staff feels appropriate. But I think that would make the community around those feel a little bit more like their kids are being protected a little bit more. So thank you.
Yep, and I would recommend if this did come to a public hearing, that'd be a good opportunity to have that as an amendment or a recommendation. Councilor Vincent and Councilor Shakti.
Yes, I read the statistics, and living right off of Colfax, I noticed that it was kind of slanted toward the liquor stores on Colfax. Or there were more violations there. That said, there's a lot of changes that are happening around, and a lot of those are the high density, more multi-use, and I noticed that there was a lot of research done around that. So I too would like to support moving this forward, and I would like to do it a little quicker. We have some businesses that may be coming in that may want to, restaurants that may want to have a liquor license, and they may be hesitating for that or not. I do agree that maybe schools should have, I'd like to see schools have input into how they feel about it. Good presentation, and I'm glad that you looked at all the different impacts on that liquor license. And what is it, Las Fuentes or whatever, has been waiting for a long, long time. So I agree with the other end there that it should be fast-tracked.
Great. Councilor Shakti.
Thank you. I appreciated the info from all the other jurisdictions. So I think we can do the fast track that was proposed and also do a close look. I think it makes sense to me to just start with the hotels and restaurants, and then there might be more we could look at as we have time and there's not as much urgency. And I also agree with the extra scrutiny. So.
Okay, so that is it. And I guess with consensus from the group, the recommendation would be to go to staff and potentially add in some bullet points for what was recommended as to extra scrutiny, or things like a little menu that can be discussed. Councilor Franks, did you have a?
I wanted to ask one question from the Liquor Authority staff. Is there any kind of a process we have where we go out and we kind of test to see if a minor can make a purchase, and then we can kind of fold that into, if we do a 2-year period, like was mentioned, that we would guarantee, that it would be obviously, no announced visit, but do we kind of test those things to see if we have people who are properly checking IDs for under 25 or whatever the age is?
Our Lakewood Police Department Special Investigations Unit does compliance checks.
They send in our explorers.
That's where most of those violations came from, either the city or the state doing those compliance checks.
Cool. Ms. Gutwein, question?
Just one last comment. In this menu of compliance options, maybe we could have an increased rate of compliance checks around the schools.
So what I would recommend is just go with their recommendations, and then we can bring those to the floor. People might have other things that they'd want to bring to the floor. Okay? So is there consensus for that, for staff to get going? All right. Well done. Thank you. There we go. All right. Will the clerk please read item 6?
Item 6, presentation, Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Community Volunteerism Proposal.
All right. We have the ACIC Vice Chair, Mr. Bruce Fustel. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you.
Well, we're 2 for 2, so.
Here's the home run.
Knock it out of the park.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Feustel, Vice Chair and the Chair overall of ACIC and the Chair of the Volunteerism Committee. I want to make a note for those watching at home that this is the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Community. It's the group that does research and makes recommendations to the City Council. And I'm going to be referring a lot to ACIC in what I'm doing, so I want it to be clear what I'm talking about. Well, here's the face of volunteering in Lakewood. A group, a lot of young people, A group working, clearing trail, maintaining trail, enhancing the trail in Lakewood. But really, volunteering in Lakewood extends from hospitals to hospice settings, from libraries to literacy programs, and in the city itself, parks department to police department. An incredibly wide array of services. And the idea is that volunteers are a part of the very fabric of everyday life in Lakewood. We wouldn't be the same without them. Here's our committee, Rod, myself, Gino, Nicole, and Laura, and I want to draw attention to three things in here. First is that we had representatives of all three committees of ACIC. So we had input on best practices for research and other approaches in what we were doing. Second, there's extensive experience on our committee providing volunteer services, and Nicole Melandri, who's here tonight, is actually a research manager for the U.S. Forest Service, so extensive experience in supervising volunteers as well. And last, each person on that group led a significant portion of the work that we did. So we divided it up and spread the work around. Everyone showed great leadership in what they were doing. Just a bit about the initial assignment and how things changed a bit over time. We started out with a grassroots proposal, which for those at home means that it came out of the ACIC itself. It wasn't something that was directed from the council. It really started out with a few members trying to become volunteers in Lakewood and having trouble getting placements, getting interviews, just getting a little frustrated with the connection to being volunteers. So we started out with the idea of studying best practices for volunteering in or for the city of Lakewood. With the help of many, including our chief clerk, we were directed to sharply reduce the focus and focus chiefly on ACIC, with some look to the future for volunteering in general, but primarily looking at ACIC and the outreach for volunteers, the retention of volunteers, and maybe we'd learn some lessons from doing that that might be applicable on a wider scale. We also, in making this change, we met with the city volunteer coordinators who we were amazed at their competence. They have over 1,000 volunteers placed in the city, a vital program in the police department, just an exquisite program. So that even backed up further our idea that we would focus on ACIC. Well, why volunteering? What's the importance? It really does build citizen engagement. The Civic Canopy initiative in the state of Colorado lists volunteering as one of the key functions connecting citizens to their cities, to their municipalities. But it's really a win-win-win situation here. The city or the organization that provides services gets cost savings, broader reach of services, and they use their staff to the highest potential. Part of what I want to highlight here are two groups, the Foothills Animal Shelter and the Police Department. Foothills Animal Shelter uses volunteers to walk dogs, to take people back, to look for potential adoptions, to clean out the kennels. In doing that, they save over 10 FTE employees a year, allowing them to be much more cost-effective in what they're doing. But they're using their staff to their highest potential. When you have people who are trained in working with dogs and cats and other animals and who are technicians, they can concentrate on doing the work they were really trained for. Similarly with the police department, with the many volunteers, they can help with research, making phone calls. And it's not that their work is unimportant, it's very important, but it isn't what you need a certified law enforcement officer for. So you can concentrate on using your staff to the full ability and using those volunteers to do the work that they can be trained fairly quickly to do. The service recipients really get a broader reach of services as well. I'm going to use the hospice example, where in hospice settings there are doctors, there are nurses, there are CNAs, there are chaplains, all of whom go visit patients for particular purposes. They're friendly and they're engaging and they do wonderful work, but they have a lot of work to do, and it primarily relates to their professional capacity. Volunteers can go in and talk for an hour or two to a patient, help them explore what they're facing, help them, play games if that's what they want to do, especially when the family is out of town. So the volunteers get a much greater reach of services and a breadth of services in that. But the volunteers win as well. They get a chance to make a difference. They connect to something they're passionate about. And that's the whole idea of freedom of choice to volunteer where you think you want to volunteer, is that you get to connect to something you really care about. And finally, you learn new skills. You learn how to do certain things, like walking dogs, but you learn new things that you hadn't done before, or you learn to apply old skills in new ways. So everybody wins. The research we did was a survey of ACIC members. We essentially talked about what's in it for you. Why do you become a member of ACIC? And how did you learn the ropes? We had a brainstorming at our annual meeting session in 2016 where we augmented this, and we reviewed Lakewood, 3 other municipalities in this particular area, looking at both inclusivity and advisory commissions and the idea of volunteerism. We looked at least 5. It really comes out to more than that, as you'll see some of the material in the back of your book, but we looked fairly closely at 5 different volunteer programs throughout the country. Well, what did we find? The cornerstone of what we found were 4 clear messages, 4 clear ideas that came out of the surveys. People really sensed that they learned about Lakewood, its government, its officials, its decision-making process. People got to make a difference. They got to study proposals, use their critical thinking skills, and make recommendations that were often given nice weight before the council. Part of it was just having fun. Making friends on ACIC joint work projects builds camaraderie, and you build for the future by strengthening your research, writing, speaking, and networking skills. We also made the finding that you could adapt this kind of message for presentations, from elevator speeches to 15-minute presentations to conversations to the website to all sorts of things. We also identified a slew of new locations and events for outreach. And we considered some of the best practices from other cities' advisory commissions. And we also considered changing the name of ACIC. More about that in a second. What were our recommendations? Using that learn, make a difference, have fun, and build for the future theme in the actual outreach messages and approaches to get a consistent message out about ACIC. Also, to create a plan to get that meeting to different meetings, organizations, and events to try to increase interest in ACIC. We also looked a lot at the Westminster November 2016 forum that they held on making Westminster a welcoming community, and we thought that having a similar public forum here in Lakewood on volunteerism or some similar topic would be helpful. History has sort of bypassed us here. We recommended creating an ad hoc committee to study the name change, and that's already come into fruition. The basic idea is, as we tried to explain ACIC to different people who were possibly interested, it just became convoluted. And then they focused on the inclusivity, which is a wonderful goal, but it's one of several, and you have to take into account that there's research and advising going on as well. So that's already coming into practice. There are some best practices and innovations from other municipal volunteer programs, both in particular Louisville and Kentucky, that are in the packet, that give some step-by-step ideas about how to do different kinds of things, like increase the number of sponsors you get for volunteers, or train people from minority groups that might not typically participate in volunteering. We also, and this goes to Lynn's point about scope creep, we didn't intend to connect to the idea that the website needs to be improved, but we pass along that idea that when we looked at this, and in particular looking at websites like Centennial's, there are ways to make the Lakewood website more user-friendly to the general public. Again, that wasn't part of our original idea, but we did come across it. I want to highlight what we're asking you to do. The public forum would be wonderful for the city council to sponsor. It's something that ACIC could also sponsor, but for reasons I'll go into in a minute, I think it makes more sense for you to do it and certainly would have more power, more attraction. The review of the best practices is something I think you should alert city staff to and take a look at some of the approaches that in Appendix E that different states, particularly the Cities of Compassion idea, over 100 cities have adopted this charter, and each city can adapt its focus to its own uses, but it sort of binds the groups together and really makes the golden rule a general idea that the city stands behind. And also, the website is for you as well to whatever extent you want to follow it. But the big one we're asking is for a public forum on volunteerism, something more process-oriented than the kinds of forums and meetings we may tend to have now, but I think for extremely worthwhile point. In terms of final thoughts, I want to highlight something I think you're already doing. Councilor Johnson, every time we've met, I think you've said, thanks for doing the hospice visits. I really appreciate your doing that, and I encourage you to keep doing that. And you've mentioned your own background in that area. That helps when a patient dies or some other thing that causes you to think, is it still worth doing this? And that kind of encouragement is great. Mayor Paul, you've come to ACIC a number of times and said, give us your independent judgment. Tell us what you think we need to hear, not what we want to hear. And I've actually heard each of you, either in your current spots or in coming to ACIC, encourage volunteers. And the final thought and the urging is that you do stuff together. You think together for a volunteerism plan, something that you can all get behind, because it's your guidance, your vision that will carry greater heft to increasing volunteerism. Second point is that the learn, make a difference, learn, make a difference, have fun, and build for the future. It's something that applies throughout. When we finished that survey and got those results, we went back to Appendix A and saw that they were pretty much the same things we were finding when we were asking questions in a much more general sense. So those sort of things may be used for other boards and commissions. They may be used to promote volunteerism in general, but it's a basic thought that could be helpful in a number of different ways. But the final thing I want to leave you with is that win-win-win scenario. It's something that unites progressives and conservatives. There's things in there for everybody. And the cost savings and the broader reach, it's all a wonderful gift that people give to their city of Lakewood and to the people in it. So that's our report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Very well done. 3 for 3. Nice job. I have one question, and that is, so when we talk about putting on the volunteer fair, do you want that to be kind of Lakewood City focused or other programs that are available within? For instance, we're trying to work with our service organizations and get their message out to the community about what they do, and that they're always looking for volunteers as well.
Yeah, we suggested volunteerism generally,
right.
But with the idea that when we looked at those cities of compassion, there was a broad range of what was emphasized. And that really led to the idea that it really needs to have the focus of each city on it, what they want to, what worked for Seattle wasn't work for Atlanta and so on. So I'd say and you've raised the faith-based stuff before, so, that could easily be it, but I think it's where you see targets of opportunity in terms of volunteerism, where we can use the strength of people we already have or something like that. But the focus on the public forum was that we had a chance for people to come in, provide their ideas. I think the Westminster one indicated that there were some new ideas and some new buy-in by people that maybe hadn't bought in before.
Well said. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you so much for this. Bruce, you did a phenomenal job as usual, so thank you very much. I love the idea of the volunteer fair. I think that that is a phenomenal idea. I really like it. And even further, I would love to see a brochure using those four or three, that's what I was thinking, but my brain stopped there for a minute. Make a difference, have fun. I think that's a great tagline and really describes what goes on in practically all of the volunteering positions. And then under that, even further with what ACIC does. I think that would really help a lot, because I think people have a hard time figuring out what ACIC does. I know, sitting on the screening committee as we interview people, I think people come in thinking it's a put your boots on, go out and do the actual work. It's hard for them to understand that it's more of a thought process and less of the actual putting your boots on. So we need a better description of what goes on in ACIC, and I think the brochure is a wonderful idea. So thank you.
Councilor Franks.
Actually, I'm going to pick up off that idea of the brochure. I think that there's some things that we may want to consider, and I apologize, I did not read the whole packet, so if some of this is in there, this may be repeat. But for me, I'd want to be finding a way for us to explore volunteer opportunities for residents who maybe have mobility limitations, maybe who are more homebound, to try to engage some of the folks out in our community who have a lot to offer, but may not have avenues to offer that. People who do in-home caregiving for maybe a spouse or other family member. So I want to kind of find if we can kind of deepen that out, maybe through that brochure, to show how we can take down some of the barriers to volunteerism, maybe through share a ride to getting to meetings, maybe through a buddy program where, instead of you needing to fill an entire volunteer position, that it can be like a shared position, kind of like how now sometimes full-time jobs 2 people do, and they can kind of split the duties, kind of fitting around their schedules. Also, some people are ideas people, but maybe not research people. So again, partnering people to kind of find and let people really put their strength in. But I think we get some resistance because people don't feel like they can do all the pieces. And I think if we figure out a way to take down some of those barriers, I also think that we need to look to idea generation, even not from maybe official volunteers, but partner with our schools and with our service clubs and things to where they get, maybe if it's Boy Scouts and maybe there's some, community service type thing where they're feeding ideas. And I just feel like we're not getting ideas as much from our youth that we would need. And I don't think we're engaging our older citizens as much. So we're kind of maybe not fully tapping into the possibilities. So we didn't have a question in there, but just wanted to throw all those out as potential ideas.
All wonderful ideas. One thing I would mention, one of our 5 was Rod Chard, who is visually impaired, and he uses the bus schedules and rides from colleagues and a number of things to participate. He also does volunteering with visual awareness and that sort of thing, but he would be excellent to take to some of these groups to give a very clear indication of how somebody can make it work even in challenging circumstances. So thank you.
And to build on that, ARCA Jefferson County has actually approached the city, and they want to try to have a more of an opportunity to have their clients be able to volunteer. So I know that Community Resources has had some conversations with them, which is fantastic. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Bruce, thank you for the research that you've done and the very lovely delivery. Some of the comments I'm going to make are kind of based on my sweet pa when he was still alive regarding seniors and volunteerism. For seniors, it keeps them relevant. They have a reason to get up in the morning. They give back to their community. That's important for some people at that age. It also keeps them connected to others. There's really more that you get out of it than what you're giving to it. And particularly seniors that stay in their homes, they suffer with depression. Having a reason to get up, to be connected to others, helps alleviate that. They stay a member of their community, and it's awesome to see that. You also said that some of the benefits that the people on ACIC have collectively talked about are the fun that you have together, and you have a team, and you're engaged. You have a social network, if you will. Well, I would just like to throw out to you that oftentimes that kind of thing happens because of the leadership. And that wouldn't happen unless you've got the leadership of Margie to kind of create that milieu. So thank you, Margie.
Thank you. I'd like to, I know that wasn't a question, but you highlighted something that's just happened in the last couple of weeks with a hospice patient I see, and I'll make this HIPAA approved without using any names. And this wasn't any great insight by me, but it was goes to your point about connecting to seniors. I have a dementia patient whose wonderful husband just gets like 2 breaks a week when hospice volunteers go in and help so he can run errands. But and she's a wonderful, very kind lady, but she's just not connecting very well at all. And so essentially I have to talk for like 3 hours straight, that's how this started out. But I finally got to this one point where I said, well, my kids have all gone to Alameda High School. And out of somewhere, she started singing the school song. And it was phenomenal. And I said, do you like songs? Oh, I love musicals. So now I'm playing musicals and she sings along. It's connecting to some aspect that she had hidden deep. But I think it's a reminder that you of what you were saying of seniors, of the importance of not forgetting about them, just doing your best to connect and trying until something, luckily, sort of falls into place.
I just again want to thank you for your volunteerism in hospice. You're doing God's work. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. Just what a beautiful proposal, and I think that all the sentiment has been captured about how important it is. And you really captured how I felt when I was on ACIC about learning, and many of the things that I learned there I try to use here, and it's just incredibly fulfilling for the whole community. So I would love to support your public forum. I think that's a great idea, and can engage hopefully a lot of new people. I also like Councilor Frank's idea of focusing on youth and seniors and just making sure we're thinking of everyone. And I think the Charter for Compassion is really interesting. So I'd encourage us to take a look at that too. So thanks again. Great job.
All right, so I'm sensing from this group that we'd like to move forward with this recommendation. And we'll send, sounds like some of it is still back
a lot of
in
it
your
is still
hands,
back
but
with
yep,
us, but
that's great.
Highlighted ones are
Appreciate
for you if you take them.
We appreciate your passion. Yeah, you guys all did a wonderful job tonight. Thank you. All right. So next up is public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that did not appear on the agenda, although you're more than welcome to talk about the 3 that you just heard about. All comments should be directed to the city council. I ask that all in attendance observe the decorum of city council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. There's a 3-minute time limit right here, and it'll be green when 2.5 minutes is, when you're at 2.5 minutes, it'll go yellow. At 3, it'll go red. And if you didn't have a chance to sign up, I'd ask that you give us your name and address or name and ward when you come up. Mr. Mace, come on down. Good evening.
I have a couple of comments tonight, and my comments are going to be directed toward Councilor Johnson. With one, I have an idea that might help with the grocery cart issue, and I am requesting this because I think that the city should require locks on every grocery cart unless they are in the parking lot of the grocery store themselves. I am, like I said, and like I've been saying, I'm tired of pulling them back. I pulled at least 3 back today from the Belmar Library. This is getting astronomically crazy. I have come up here time and time again. Councilor Johnson, I know you have asked the city attorney when the ordinance is going to be out, but council needs to expedite this. This is something that I think needs to be expedited immediately, and I would really appreciate it if council would request locks on the grocery carts. My second comment is to let everybody know that Jefferson County schools are getting ready to go back into session. Regarding August 17th is the first day of Jefferson County. All Jefferson County schools will be back in session on August 17th. It is on the computer. So the last thing that I want to mention is the kids are going to be going back to school, so we're going to be having a lot of issues within the junior high and grade school situation. So I want to ask, I will continue to work on the anti-bullying project, and I'm more than willing to do it by myself. But at this time, I don't need, I'm ready to bring something forward if council's ready to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chisholm. Good evening.
Can you hear me? Okay. City Council, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. My name is Jay Chisholm. I'm the property owner at 1595 Carr Street, Lakewood, Colorado. As you know, the property fell victim to a smash and grab robbery. Some guys ran a car into the front of the building in an attempt to break in and steal guns. This pushed the front of the building in 5 inches and caused $30,000 worth of damage and still counting. My wife and I are crime victims, and now on top of this, we have no insurance to cover the cost. We are senior citizens at retirement age. My wife is on Social Security. We do not make a lot of money. Let us return to the scene of our crime. This wall was built without a permit. This was our mistake. The city also made a mistake in giving us a permit for new electrical in units A, B, C, and D. We spent $40,000 on this, and now the city tells us we cannot have a permit to build out units C and D. Marty Wilson Lloyd with the city told us in March of 16, she was sorry that they were sorry they had not told us of the land use restrictions on our property at that time. Look how close the wall is to the building. Why is this such a problem? The city says they are going to tear down this wall. If you tear out the wall, we'll be further away from getting fire insurance. Look at units C and D. What if there is a fire? The permitted electrical passes through these units. See the pipe? None of the units will have electricity, and we will be out of business. I made a mistake. You made a mistake. Let us forgive each other and move on. Please help senior citizen crime victims on a fixed income. The plans are done. The work has been started. To be allowed to continue where we left off is the quickest way to a solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Ms. Duffy? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I come to you tonight with some good news. Great news for Lakewood, for all of us, for Terumo BCT, one of the major employers in Lakewood, but more for children with cancer. 2 weeks ago, the Oncology Committee of the FDA gave their approval to push forward on a vote of 10-0 the CAR T-cell therapy that Terumo BCT has been providing equipment for. It's been in clinical trials for 5 years. I want you to watch this very short video, and I want you to notice all the equipment in the hospital room. That was produced right here in Lakewood, and we're curing cancer in children. I know you know about Terumo BCT, and many of you have been to our annual fundraiser that we do for LLS. We've raised a lot of money. Terumo has raised over $1 million, and LLS has contributed over $20 million to this project. And someday is today. I have to play this for you. We're so proud.
Today's landmark decision started with a young pioneer, Emily Whitehead, now literally the textbook example of this groundbreaking therapy.
Look at this face. This says, I'm happy.
Couldn't be more proud.
We met Emily a year and a half ago at age 10, still cancer-free after being diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia when she was 5.
At one point, the doctor came in and said, you need to call your family in because Emily's not going to be here tomorrow.
But doctors at the University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia developed the CAR T-cell treatment. Emily was the first child in the world to receive it.
She's cancer-free, and I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a dream.
Here's how it works. From a blood sample, a patient's own immune cells are separated out and then genetically reprogrammed, turning them into super fighters that hunt out and destroy cancer cells. At the FDA hearing today, fighting back tears, Tom Whitehead testified next to Emily.
If you want to see what a cure looks like, she's standing right beside me.
This fall, the full FDA is expected to approve this treatment for relapsing leukemia in children and young adults. It's grueling, but 83% of patients went into remission. The ultimate goal, try it on other cancers.
It's hard for me to even articulate how exciting this is. I mean, everybody has been working toward this for so long.
For Emily Whitehead, today's decision is about hope.
It's kind of exciting because it'll get the treatment to a lot more kids.
A historic step in science, thanks to a brave young girl. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
They gave him life, but today Charlie Gard's parents decided
he had no chance.
Very nice.
We are so proud. You can be so proud. These equipment have been used for 5 years in clinical trials, and finally, we don't expect final approval until September. As you know, government moves slowly, and that's for a reason. This is going to be right. And then with this, it will go forward to other types of cancers, other types of blood cancers, that this will go forward and help to cure. Thank you. We should all be proud today.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkins? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Paul and the rest of you councilors, and that's a heck of an act to have to follow. But I'm happy for you. I was here almost exactly a year ago, and I was talking, I think, at that time about two things, and I'm going to talk about the same ones tonight. My name you have. Would you like me to repeat it? Okay. I'm here about, first of all, I want to give some praise to the city of Lakewood. I was complaining last year about weeds particularly along Bear Creek, which is where I happen to live. And I have been the mosquito in the camping tent for a long time with this city, for 12 years, nagging about those weeds. And I want to praise Drew Spassky and whoever was behind him to say, wow, we finally seem to be on top of that weed issue. There are a few places. I contacted him today via email to say, we're missing a few places, but I walk the area almost daily, and I know his people can't possibly keep up with me. So my first thing is praise, and yes, I will stay on the job and continue to be the mosquito. However, this mosquito has another issue, and I brought it up last year also, and that is the bike path that goes along Bear Creek. It is labeled bike path, and I brought it up last year. That is not a bike path. That is a multi-use path. And I'd like to address this to Councilor Johnson. Thank you for your concern about seniors, because I am a member of that group, and I talk to my neighbors, and there's a large group of seniors down in that area. And there's an awful lot of women particularly who say, we don't walk that bike path, for a number of reasons. Some of it is the transients that have come from our eastern neighbors into the area, and I witnessed a police incident yesterday morning, and I just asked the police here tonight if they could tell me what really happened, because I'm getting questions from my neighbors about what the heck went on. They couldn't answer my question, but they did say they'd follow up. My other issue, which I brought up last year, and actually Drew Spaffke, once again, he and I rode our bikes along the path. It's the lycras, and I used that term last year also, the lycras, the people on bikes that go whipping along that trail and scare the living daylights out of those who walk it. There are all kinds of senior citizens, and I just read some new articles. Maybe you heard about forest bathing. Is that a new term to everybody? Forest bathing is basically get out in the forest, and it has nothing to do with bathing suits or anything like that. It just says if you're out in the forest, you are picking up some kind of nutrients, literally from the trees and from the ambience, and it is healthy for everybody, not just seniors. Well, my senior neighbors aren't doing that. And I think we need to focus on this. Okay, really quickly, there are two issues, two signs that I want to talk about. There's a brand new sign down there on the path that I just noticed this morning, and that nailed it for me. I was thinking of coming to this tonight anyway, and that nailed it. New signs that say, hey, we've got a great regional bike path. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that. But Drew and I talked about this, that we've got to do something about the speed demons in Lycra. We've got to enforce the idea that pedestrians have a right to be on that trail too. And the bikers don't own it. Yesterday during that police incident, I tried to flag bikers to say, watch it, you're coming up on a police scene. Be aware. They wouldn't even stop for me when I'm saying, please stop, I have some information for you. As a matter of fact, I got insulted. So there's a better way. And I'm here tonight to request, please, can we do something about signs and enforcement to recognize the pedestrians on the trail, the pedestrians, the strollers, the rollerbladers, the joggers, the people that the bikers flat out don't respect. I'm sorry to take so much time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And your two council members are here, and we'll make sure that you're connected. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right. That's all that's signed up. Anybody else wish to speak? Ms. Kellen. Two weeks in a row. Boredom?
She's ready to come back.
Welcome.
Hello, Board. Thank you, Karen Callan, 675 Dudley Street, Lakewood. I just wanted to come. I'm here. I've been working with Las Fuentes Mexican Restaurant, as many of you know, and we do have the father-daughter team who owns and operates it back here, Lucino and Janet Sandville. Wave. And for anyone who hasn't been there, you should go because the food is amazing. And I just wanted to thank you for moving forward on this issue and also for many of your requests to do this expeditiously. They've been in a tough spot for several years now, kind of forced to move in a very short notice because of development pressures where they were. But they've been here for nearly 18 years, a good, strong business in this community. And I also want to thank the Civic Awareness Committee. They were amazing through this process. They worked so hard. They went back several times digging deeper to give you a very complete report. And I really appreciate the work that they did. And I wanted to thank them for that. So I'm just here to say thanks.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. With that, I'll close public comment. And I appreciate all the folks that came out. So next we have the consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Tonight it's just a resolution. Two resolutions. So we will have a public comment period on those. Any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the city clerk please read the items on the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 8 through 10 inclusive. Item 8, Resolution 2017-24, creating a City Council Policies and Procedures Manual Drafting Committee and appointing members thereto. And you would be adopting the revised resolution that's at your places tonight, which removes Shakti as a member of that ad hoc committee. Item 9, Resolution 2017-25, authorizing the assignment to Metro West Housing Solutions of the City of Lakewood's 2017 private activity bond allocation. And item 10, accepting the minutes of the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Communities Executive Committee meetings of May 3rd and June 7th, as well as their full commission meetings of April 19th and May 17th, all 2017.
No, I'm going to hold off on the motion and ask for a quick update on resolution number 2017-25 from Nanette Nealon. Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The resolution tonight that's in front of you is a resolution that was similar to last year for the allocation of the access to tax-exempt bonds by Metro West Housing. What I got asked is a clarification that there is no bonds that the city's issuing. It comes under a federal program, and we're one of 53 municipalities that get a direct allocation. And what does that mean for City Council? You get to direct who gets access to those tax-exempt funding through a specific project. And in past years, except for last year, we have not allocated our allocation, and when you don't, it goes back into the state allocation. So your action tonight will give access for Metro West Housing to get access to tax-exempt bonding through a third party, not through the city. And I hope that.
Any questions for Ms. Nealon on this? Councilor Abel?
Not a question really, but as this project develops, we need to keep an eye on the traffic on Independence. We have Ivor Elementary School there with problems twice a day now, trying to get all those kids into school safely. And we're going to have these new residences, or new residents there that will also need some room to roam in their vehicles. So just please, let's keep an eye on the traffic, Ms. Hodgson, and stay on top of it before the problems get much worse. Thank you.
One more. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison?
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm to make sure that anybody listening at home, the city is not taking on any liability or any debt with this. All this is effectively ability for those bonds to be issued. And if we don't do this, we lose the ability to give that bonding. I guess would that be the correct way?
I look at the bond as like a loan.
Right.
So we're given access. We're assigning the access for Metro West Housing to work with another entity, and the city's totally out of it. Yes.
And if we don't assign it, we lose it. It goes back to the whole state, correct?
State. Yes.
So it's either use it or lose it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the questions. And I'm now going to open the public comment part. Nobody signed up. We do have a letter from Mr. Ditson. I don't know. Looks like he wants to come on down. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I was able to make it this evening. You all got an email. I just wanted to express, Paul Ditson, President of Ivor Neighborhood Association. I did want to express our support for the Metro West Housing Solutions project at Indy Street Flats. They've been very gracious in working with the community in coming up with a design that not only fits in with the neighborhood well, but it also serves to save the Masonic Temple, which is of historic interest to the neighborhood. We're very gratified that Metro West has been so cooperative, and we look forward to working with them in the future on this project.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all your hard work for the neighborhood as well. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and ask for a motion.
Mayor Paul, I move for the acceptance of the minutes and boards and commissions and for the adoption of the resolutions, all which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into record by the city clerk.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second, and just for clarification, when you were reading these, there is an amended version of 17-24. Did you enter that, removing Shakti?
Yes, you did.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. I was standing up, so I didn't hear it. All right, motion and second, any discussion? Mr. Coop?
I do have a question about Resolution 2017-24 with Councilor Shakti being removed. That leaves just 3 people, or is she going to be replaced by someone else? Because being part of the meeting so far, there was an awful lot being put on this committee to be writing this, and I know a couple people in that group have very, very busy schedules. Is there why is there just? What's the thought behind going with 3 and not 4? Or
so I appreciate that, and I have 2 folks who volunteered. I think are very capable, especially with the written word, to step in. And I mean I think there's more. However, if we get to a point, we can always come back, and things that we might struggle with, we're going to bring back to a group as a whole. And I'd ask the two other folks if they are comfortable with that or if they feel like they'd want to see another. I'll go with Councilor Franks and then Councilor Abel.
I would say I can speak for myself. I'm comfortable with that. I think we got a lot of good direction out of the edits that have already been fed into the process. And we certainly always have the option if something becomes difficult, we can put it back into our regular group meeting. So I'm fine moving forward with that.
Councilor Abel?
I think we're up to the challenge. Thank you.
Councilor Shakti?
And I think part of the thinking is that a smaller group is more nimble in terms of the ability for everybody to make a certain night. So.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? All right. Let's vote tonight. And that passes 11 ayes, 0 nays. Okay. So general business, a couple things I wanted to talk about. Whoa. Councilor Wickman, do you want to go?
I'm noting that we're before 9 o'clock, a marked contrast from last time's midnight. And one of my concerns is or managing these meetings. Over the last couple of months, we've got a lot of business out there, with development and stuff like that. And we've had a lot of meetings where we really discussed nothing of consequence, got out before 9 o'clock. And then on the other hand, we don't have time to deal with the important issues. So at the last meeting, it was mentioned that we had bumped the discussion on the M zoning units in order to talk about the moratorium. And there was kind of, some people were trying to imply that was kind of the end of our opportunity to speak on stuff. And I'm looking at the agenda, and I think we've got some opportunities to get down to do some work. Number one, we could still go a little bit more tonight, but if you don't, you don't. That's fine. But next Monday night, July 31st, we don't have a meeting. So I would suggest that we take that opportunity and discuss the M zones or some of the other things that you mentioned on the list on July 31st. In addition, I'm looking at August 14th, and all I see at this point is a couple first readings and a resolution that on its face looks like should take about 10 minutes. So it looks to me like August 14th has got some time. And then finally, August 21st, the study session, nothing is scheduled for that. So I would like to take these items that we've postponed from last Monday night and start putting them into those slots, and starting with next Monday.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for that. I was going to talk a little bit about these things that we have. Keep in mind, we have a grocery cart ordinance that hopefully we're going to get on board here sometime soon. And then what I would like to recommend, and unfortunately people are traveling on the 31st. So that's something that's why we ask for people's schedules ahead of time to make sure we know what their summer looks like. But I think what I would like to propose is that we go forward on August 7th, and we have a whole list of things that we need to talk to, and I'd like to invite the Planning Commission to be a part of that and do a joint session with our Planning Commission, as well as this body, to discuss all the things that we have been talking about, to look at quick wins or easy wins that we can address, and to get an idea of what some of these larger items are going to be and what that process is going to look like. So I imagine from that, Councilor Wickman, if we had that on August 7th, you'd start to see the rest of that fill up depending upon what comes out and where we go. And then the other issue too is that we need to get put in place, which we will, Councilor Wickman's proposal to look at fees. That's another issue that this council said that they want to look at, fees in lieu. So that needs to be figured into the schedule going forward as well. So with that, is there consternation about doing that on August 7th with the Planning Commission and the City Council? Good idea. Ms. Franks?
The only comment I would make is no, I don't find that to be too big of a delay, but if we have the 10 days notice for the public, is there any way that for the 14th meeting we can pre-queue something up and know what might go in that slot? Since if we only decide the night of the 7th to see what shakes out, then the 14th is only 7 days and we don't give our folks that extra time.
You bet. So, I mean, I think there could maybe be some loose framework. I mean, we're going to have some flexibility. You know, this body wanted to give, you know, the most time possible. So it's kind of, you know, how do we do that? Ms. Hodson?
One common theme that we heard from you above all of the others on this list is concern around parking. So that might be something, if you direct us, we can have ready for conversation on the 14th to better in greater detail, also to be discussed on the 7th when you're putting the priorities together with the Planning Commission. But if you'd like, we can go ahead and get started on the parking issue. That seemed to be a reoccurring concern that you've heard from constituents.
I think another huge concern would be just the density limits on some of the, I think that's for kind of citywide, that might be a bigger issue. For some of our areas, we're not really experiencing the same parking, but it's the sheer unlimited numbers of units that are allowed, I think is one that, I don't know if that's percolating with anybody else, but it's that lack of an upper limit on density that's still leaving communities feeling, I think that's bigger for Ward 4 than parking. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
So again, and I appreciate that, and I think we need to get, one is we have a planning commission that they own that zoning ordinance. They need to be a part of this. Absolutely. And, you know, when I sat down with everybody, parking actually was the common theme that I heard from everybody as to the issue. But you're right, it's different in every ward, and there's not going to be an easy process. This was a 3-year process to get where we are. And we're trying to change it in a matter of months, and that's going to be a challenge. So I would continue to say, you know, this could be a nice way forward. And then if that comes out of that, you know, because that is one of the things on that list, to have a full conversation about that. Councilor Vincent?
Yeah, I just want to say it wasn't a part of the parking related to that 3/4 of a car per high density. So I think that may be incorporated in some of that, because I think that's a big issue. So,
Councilor Abel?
I think parking is an important issue, especially the 3/4 of a parking space. But I think the larger issue that I hear from folks in Ward 1 and Ward 4 is the mixed use, and especially mixed use employment. That's where these larger projects are hanging and becoming purely residential. And I believe that that's the biggest issue we're looking at and deserves the most discussion.
Okay. Councilor Johnson?
Well, I really want to thank council for understanding the importance of what happened last Monday and for the immediacy that we need to give to this issue of high density. The parking and many other things spawn off of what we're doing there. Thank you.
So again, I think that we have direction to move forward to have a joint session that we can get posted, and everything that was brought up on both sides here, that is going to be part of that discussion.
I'd like to mention also that my friends on the Planning Commission seem to be more concerned about the mixed use than other issues that we've been looking at. So, and parking is certainly part of that mixed use discussion.
So it'll be a nice opportunity for us all to get together. Cool. Ms. Hodson, does that sound amazing?
That does, sir. Sounds amazing.
Okay.
Thank you. Sounds fine.
We're not quite there, Pete. We're going to wait it out. Pete's trying to get us out of here before 9. So with that, we'll go to reports and see if we can do that. Bless you. Quick reports. Had the awesome opportunity to go to the O'Kane picnic, which was fantastic. National Night Out is coming up the first Tuesday of August, which happens to be August 1st. German Fest was a lot of fun, and Councilor Johnson tried to get my attention before the Bartels left to thank them, but we want to thank them. That was the first time we've had that in the city of Lakewood, so thank you for that. The city of Lakewood, for those on the budget and audit and some folks that got to come, we had our audit wrap up, and again, the city did a fantastic job and received high marks for another year of great financial stewardship of the taxpayer dollars. And I will just leave it with this one last thank you. I had the opportunity to go on a ride along Friday night with our police department, and it's amazing to see what does really go on in this city, and the fact that most people really have no idea what really goes on in the city. And that's credit to our professional police department and the job that they do protecting us. It is amazing to see these guys and gals work in calmness in the middle of the night on a SWAT call, and you'd think it was just another day on the street. So thank you all for everything that you do. It's incredible. We're very blessed. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everybody that this Friday, July 28th, had to do that in my brain, Carmody Park will be having their grand opening, and the people surrounding Carmody are so thrilled about the upgrade of that park, and they are really thankful to the city for what is happening. Even had a mom that was talking about taking her disabled child over there in a wheelchair and felt really blessed to have that opportunity. So we did something really wonderful there, and I'm really proud of Lakewood for what we've done. I just wanted to say thank you very much. And they're looking forward to phase 2. Thank you. Yeah. And National Night Out, be sure to go, because this is such a phenomenal program to get to meet your neighbors, people that you wave at all the time, but now you can actually shake their hand and get to know them. So I think it's really phenomenal. Please go if you have one in your neighborhood.
Great park. I actually worked out there this morning on the new fitness thing that they put up. Yeah. So if I can do it, all the council can do it. Council President Roybal.
No report.
Councilor Shakti.
No report.
Councilor Johnson.
I too, and I am appreciative that you mentioned the Bartels. Thank you. They did a phenomenal job with this, the first time ever, a German Fest in Lakewood. And Bernie and Heidi have put hundreds of hours into promoting this and to make it happen. I'm hopeful that it'll be the beginning of a new tradition in Lakewood. And then I'd like to thank James for bringing up the grocery carts. I have not forgotten. Earlier this afternoon, I was promised that this was going to be put on a little faster track than what we've been going, and you keep us honest and keep bringing it up. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilor Abel.
On Saturday, August 5th, we'll be having our Ward 1 meeting at 920 Kipling Street, and hope to see everyone there. And it's a reminder that it's not just for folks from Ward 1, but anyone who wants to come and join us and bring their voice, we would love to hear it. Thank you.
Councilor Vincent.
Yes, St. Bernadette's is having their 70th anniversary this Sunday, and they're having an open house from 1 to 6. It's an absolutely beautiful church, and they're doing a lot of things, so everybody's welcome.
That's cool. Thank you. Councilor Franks. Councilor Gutwein. Councilor Wickman.
Yeah, two things. Again, the German Festival is real good. I would like to suggest that we try to encourage to have more festivals. And so if there's ways that we can help people like that, make a little contribution or something like that, I think we ought to do more to encourage those sort of activities. Secondly, Mr. Chisholm comes in repeatedly, week after week, month after month. Can I suggest at some point we respond to him? I mean, I know he runs off real quick, but, at some point when he speaks, respond to him one way or the other.
Yes, we have had a continuing conversation with the Chisholm family, and we are working closely with Jay and his wife.
Could you do it in public so we all like to hear a resolution at some point?
So let me weigh in on that. I think, it's a private business having issues, and I don't know if it's appropriate for the whole body to hear, there are some issues like he said that he's gone into, and it's not as black and white. I think if you'd want a briefing on that, you certainly could have that opportunity or talk to his council members in Ward 1 who've been working with him. But we have tried to respond to him, and I do believe council has been copied on multiple updates by Jay Hutchison.
Well, my point is, everybody watching this hears him every week, and they don't hear any response.
Well, I think it's out of respect for Mr. Chisholm that you're not hearing a response.
Okay, whatever.
Mr. Coop?
I would just like to say to everybody watching this now on the computer, on television, get it later, the Chisholm family is responded to by the city staff on a continual basis. Thank you.
Chief Clerk Margie Greer? Nothing? All right. Mr. Graham? Yes. I like it too. It's going to stick. Nice job, Bruce. Greg? Ms. Hodson?
Quick reminder, the second Lakewood High School workshop meeting is tomorrow, Tuesday, the 25th, from 6 to 9 at the Clements Center. Just a reminder.
Okay. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we'll adjourn at 9:02. All right. Thank you.
Kisses on a summer's day, laughing all our cares away, just you and I. Sweet